The moment Lincoln Vincent slid the manila folder across the Thanksgiving table toward me, the entire room fell into a silence so sudden it felt like the air had been sucked out. Not the warm, comfortable silence of a family dinner, the other kind. The kind that presses on your ribs and whispers that something terrible has already been decided. The folder stopped beside my plate, right between the cranberry sauce and my untouched glass of wine. Lincoln's fingers lingered on the cardboard edge for a second before he withdrew his hand, as if he had just placed a chess piece on the board and was waiting for the opponent's move. "Ariella," he said calmly, "I think we all agree it's time." Time. Such a polite word for betrayal. I looked down the table. 27 various relatives sat around the long oak dining table in the Vincent Club's private room. Candlelight flickered across polished silverware and the half-empty plates of turkey and sweet potatoes. But no one spoke. No one asked what was happening. Which meant only one thing. They already knew. My eyes slowly moved to my husband. Marcus sat beside me, shoulders slightly hunched, staring into his wine glass like a man studying the bottom of a well. "Marcus," I said quietly. He didn't answer. That silence cut deeper than any words. Lincoln cleared his throat. "You've had 3 years, Ariella. Our family has been patient." Claudia Vincent placed her napkin carefully on the table. "We simply have to face reality," she added, her voice soft but sharp. Reality. The word hung in the air like frost. I finally opened the folder. Inside were divorce papers, neatly printed, already notarized, prepared long before tonight. For a moment my fingers trembled. But then I remembered something my mother once told me when I was 17 and signing my first apartment lease. Never sign anything until you read every word. So I began reading, slowly, line by line. Across the table, someone shifted uncomfortably. A fork clinked against a plate. Lincoln leaned forward. "The settlement is extremely generous," he said. "The house, 6 months of financial support." "I know what the terms say," I interrupted quietly without looking up. My voice surprised even me. It was steady, calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. Finally, I lifted my eyes to Marcus. "You could have just talked to me," I said. For a moment I thought he might finally speak. Instead he looked away, and that was when something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet crack in the heart where hope used to live. I picked up the pen lying beside the folder. Around the table, people leaned forward, waiting. But none of them noticed the one person who hadn't moved all evening. 3 chairs down sat my best friend, Sienna Hancock, a well-known YouTube blogger and author specializing in family relationships. Her hands rested calmly on her lap, and tucked inside her jacket was a small brown envelope. Inside that envelope was a truth powerful enough to destroy the Vincent family. And only 2 people at this table knew it. Sienna and me. But the Vincents were about to learn something important. Tonight wasn't the night they ended my story. It was the night theirs began to fall apart. If you had asked me during the first year of my marriage whether the Vincent family loved me, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now I understand something painful. Wars rarely begin with shouting. They begin quietly. The first question came 4 months after the wedding. We were sitting in Lincoln and Claudia Vincent's glass sunroom overlooking Lake Michigan. Snow drifted lazily outside while Claudia poured tea into delicate porcelain cups. Lincoln leaned back in his leather chair. "So," he said casually, stirring his tea, "when do we expect to hear good news?" I smiled politely. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. "We're enjoying being newlyweds," I said. Claudia's smile was gentle, but cold around the edges. "Of course," she said. "But the Vincent men usually start families young." That was the first crack. After that, the questions came like steady rain. At Easter dinner, during Sunday phone calls, at random Tuesday afternoons when Claudia would just check in. "Have you seen a specialist? My friend's daughter conceived after acupuncture. Stress can affect fertility, you know." Marcus always said the same thing afterward. "You know how they are." But slowly, something began to change. 14 months into our marriage, my doctor gave me the diagnosis: polycystic ovary syndrome. Manageable, treatable. But conception might take longer. I sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel while tears blurred the parking lot lights. When I told Marcus that night, he held me. "We'll figure it out," he whispered. For a moment, I believed him. But the next week, I overheard a phone call. Marcus stood in the living room speaking quietly. "I don't know yet, Dad," he said. When he noticed me in the doorway, his voice changed instantly. "Just work stuff," he said quickly. After that, the pressure grew sharper. One evening at dinner, Lincoln set down his fork and looked directly at me. "The Vincent legacy is important," he said. "Marcus must think about his future." My chest tightened. "I am his future," I said softly. Lincoln's answer was a long, disappointed silence. That was the night I called the only person who truly listened. My best friend, Sienna Hancock, a relationship expert with millions of viewers online. When I finished telling her everything, she didn't speak for several seconds. Then she said something that made my stomach turn cold. "Ariella, I think they're preparing to replace you." I laughed nervously. "That can't be true." Sienna's voice was quiet. "No," she said. "It's strategic." 8 months later, she arrived at my apartment carrying a stack of documents. And when I saw the first page, I realized the war against me had never been quiet at all. It had just been carefully hidden. If you want to understand betrayal, watch a room full of people pretend nothing terrible is happening. That's exactly what the Vincents did while I signed the papers. The pen felt unusually heavy in my fingers. My name, Ariella Vincent, looked strange written at the bottom of a document that was erasing it from my life. One signature, then another. Across the long oak table, 27 people watched in silence. Lincoln Vincent folded his hands like a judge overseeing a verdict he had already written. "Take your time," he said smoothly. "We want this to be respectful." Respectful. I almost laughed. I signed the final page and gently closed the folder. "There," I said quietly, "your problem is solved." For a moment, Lincoln looked satisfied. But Claudia Vincent suddenly stood. "There is one more matter," she said. Her voice was calm, but rehearsed. She walked to the entrance of the dining room and gestured toward someone waiting outside. A woman stepped in. She was young, elegant, dark hair falling perfectly over a green silk dress. And when she approached Marcus, she leaned down and whispered something into his ear like she belonged there. My stomach dropped, because I recognized her. "Vanessa," Lincoln announced proudly, "Marcus's college girlfriend, the woman his parents had once described as the one who should have been family." And then I noticed something that made my chest tighten. Pearl earrings, Claudia's pearls. The heirloom pair she once showed me in her jewelry box. "I'll give these to the mother of the next Vincent heir," she had said. Apparently, that decision had already been made. Lincoln smiled across the table at me. "Vanessa understands our family values." Something in the room shifted. They expected tears. Maybe anger, a potential departure amid scandal. Instead, I stood calmly and pushed my chair back. "Well," I said softly, "this has been enlightening." I reached for my purse, and that's when another chair moved. Sienna stood up. My best friend had been silent the entire evening. Now she reached into her jacket and pulled out a small brown envelope. "Before Ariella leaves," she said calmly, "Mr. Vincent should probably read this." Lincoln frowned. "What exactly is that?" Sienna placed the envelope in front of him. "Truth," she said. Lincoln opened it impatiently. But the moment his eyes landed on the first document, the color drained from his face. "What is this?" he whispered. Sienna folded her arms. "A certified medical record." Lincoln's hands began to tremble as he read the name printed at the top. Marcus Vincent. Procedure: vasectomy. Performed 4 years earlier, long before Marcus had ever met me. The room exploded with whispers. Lincoln turned slowly toward his son. "You did what?" Marcus stared at the table. And in that moment, the entire Vincent empire began to crack. But Sienna wasn't finished. She reached into the envelope again. "There's one more document," she said quietly. And when Lincoln saw the second paper, he nearly dropped it. There are moments when truth enters a room so suddenly that everything changes shape around it. This was one of those moments. Lincoln Vincent's hands trembled as he stared at the second document Sienna had placed before him. The room, which only seconds ago had been buzzing with shocked whispers about Marcus's vasectomy, fell into a stunned stillness again. "What is this?" Lincoln asked hoarsely. Sienna's voice was calm. "Read it." Lincoln's eyes moved across the page, then lower, then to the small black and white image clipped behind it. His face drained of color. Claudia leaned toward him anxiously. "Lincoln?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly turned the page toward Marcus. "Marcus, read it." And for the first time that evening, my husband actually looked at me. His expression was not anger, not even guilt. It was disbelief. "That's impossible," he whispered. Sienna tilted her head slightly. "Rare," she corrected, "but medically documented." Lincoln slammed the paper down on the table. "Someone explain this." "So I did. I'm pregnant." The words were quiet, but they shattered the room like glass. Claudia grabbed the back of her chair. Marcus shook his head slowly. No, that can't be right." I looked at him calmly. "Apparently vasectomies sometimes reverse themselves," I said. Sienna nodded. "Less than 1% of cases. But Marcus appears to be exceptionally unlucky. Or lucky, depending on how you looked at it." Lincoln stared at the ultrasound image again. 8 weeks. The only Vincent grandchild that would ever exist. I watched realization crawl across his face. Hope, greed, possession. And that was when I delivered the truth they hadn't prepared for. "I'm keeping the baby." Lincoln leaned forward instantly. "Of course you are. That child belongs to this family." "No," I said quietly. The word sliced through the room. "My child belongs to me," Claudia gasped. Marcus stood suddenly. "Ariella, wait. Don't." My voice stopped him mid-step. For 3 years he had watched them humiliate me. For 3 years he had said nothing. Now it was my turn to speak. "You wanted an heir," I said, looking directly at Lincoln. "Well, here he is." Lincoln's eyes gleamed. Relief washed across his face. And that was when I said the final sentence. "The only problem," I continued softly, "is that none of you will ever meet him." The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. Lincoln's chair scraped violently against the floor. "You can't keep a Vincent grandchild away from this family." I picked up my purse. "Oh," I said calmly, walking toward the door. "Watch me." 5 months later, the divorce papers arrived in a thick envelope stamped by the court. I opened it at my kitchen table while snow drifted softly past the window. Finalized. Just one word at the bottom of the page. One word that closed a door forever. Lincoln Vincent had tried to fight at first. His lawyers had threatened hearings, custody battles, public pressure. But scandals spread quickly in powerful circles. A secret vasectomy. 3 years of documented harassment. A pregnant wife publicly humiliated at Thanksgiving. Even Lincoln's attorneys eventually told him the truth. "This case will destroy your reputation." So we signed. Marcus didn't call. Not once. A month later, I heard he had moved to Portland. Gone like a man erasing a mistake. And then, on a warm Tuesday morning in June, after 12 long hours of labor, my son entered the world. Sienna stood beside the hospital bed, gripping my hand. "Come on, Ari," she whispered. "You've got this." My mother wiped tears from her cheeks. And then the doctor said the words that changed everything. "It's a boy." They placed him gently in my arms. Dark hair, calm eyes, perfect. "What's his name?" Sienna asked softly. I looked down at him, feeling something powerful settle in my chest. "James," I said. Not a Vincent name. Not a legacy name, just his. Later that night, when the hospital room grew quiet, my mother sat beside me. "You know what you did that night at Thanksgiving?" she said. "What?" "You didn't run." I looked at my sleeping son. "No," I said quietly. "I stayed long enough to end their story." James stirred softly in my arms. And in that moment I realized something simple and beautiful. The Vincents had spent generations building a legacy of power. But the life I was building, the small apartment, my son's quiet breathing, the women who never left my side, that was something stronger. Not an empire, a family.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.